Hello, welcome to another episode of High Tea with Hony. Today, I'm excited to welcome Jo Leckie, the founder of the CEO of Big Picture Training, joining us. Jo is an award-winning customer experience influencer with over 30 years of experience in the social housing sector, including senior leadership roles in both UK and Australia. Through her work, she has transformed customer service experience in social housing. Today, we will explore Jo's journey, her passion for service excellence, and her transition to running Big Picture Training full-time. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, and get ready for an engaging conversation. So, Jo, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, honey. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me along.
You're welcome. Jo, you had a fascinating career spanning over 30 years in the social housing sector. Can you tell us about your journey? What inspired for you to focus customer service excellence?
Okay, it's a very long journey, honey. Where should we start? As you mentioned, I started in the sector back in 1992, so that makes it 32 years ago now. So a very long time. And it was an accident. And I think that happens with a lot of people, doesn't it? And I was listening to Sheila last week, and she was Sheila Starr, and she was talking about her journey. And mine was very similar. It was an accident. So prior to having my family, I worked in a five-star London hotel because I'd left school with shorthand typing. I went to Pitman Central College and I learned shorthand typing. That was my skill. And I got a job as the PA to the general manager of a five-star London hotel, which is where I met my first husband. And we settled down, we had children, and then when my youngest was 4 years old, she needed to go to school and I needed to go back to work. And in the meantime, my ex-husband had become a Michelin guide inspector. He was the youngest ever Michelin guide inspector. So he was the guy going around the UK giving people like Gordon Ramsay their first Michelin stars. So I had certainly, my early career was in very high-end, five-star, fantastic service excellence. We were all about service excellence. I was looking for a job that was school hours, so I'd got my shorthand typing, that's what I could do. So I was looking for a job that was school hours, 9 till 3. I'd got two children already at school, my youngest was going to school, and I saw a job advertised, and it was actually Jefferson, who are now Stonewater. Jefferson Housing Association were looking for a customer service assistant. So in other words, I needed to be able to answer the phone, I needed to be able to type, I needed to be the first point of contact into the housing association. And I thought, well, I can do all of those things. But I saw the housing officer job above, and I thought, that is the job I really want. But I got the housing assistant job. I didn't apply for housing officer. I knew I wasn't qualified for that. Got the housing assistant job and then started doing my studying, my qualifications and what have you. And was soon promoted to housing officer and then started working for a local authority, Northampton Borough Council actually, for 6 years as a housing officer, which is the best grounding you could ever have, I think, in a local authority as a housing officer. But what I did learn was that I wasn't happy with the way that customers were stigmatised in the sector, and it wasn't Northampton's fault or Jefferson's fault. It was just the way things were back in the 90s, that people stigmatised the tenants, and customer service was frankly appalling. And it was just a big bugbear of mine, and I thought I need to be able to influence this in some way, shape or form. I left Northampton Borough Council. I'd just done my degree. I left Northampton Borough Council and went to work for a very small housing association, very small. They only had 5,000 properties at that point, Hastow Housing Association, and as an area manager, and then just gradually built my career up from there. Hastow was great because they were all about the people. It was really where I needed to be at that point. They were all about the people, which is what I'm all about. And I always say, and I say it a lot, we're in the housing business, but actually we're housing people. So really we're in the people business, providing homes not in the housing business, housing people. It's the other way around. It's all about the people, and that's where I think we've gone wrong. In growing as housing associations, particularly with the huge development programs, the people get forgotten. And things have changed. We're going the right way. We started off well. Things have started slipping. But I was very lucky to work at Places for People, where I was on the the group who developed their customer service training program, and I then started delivering it. And then again at Orbit, the same thing. And so wherever I've worked, it's always been about the people and always been involved in the customer experience, the customer service element. And as I've worked my way up, to head of housing kind of level, always been customer first. Anyone who's worked with me will tell you that, customer first. And then in 2016, we emigrated to Australia because my husband got a job out there. And I took my customer service ethos with me out to Australia, where I was General Manager Housing for a housing organisation in Victoria in Australia. And I did that for 2.5, 3 years. Created customer service training for them, I was General Manager Housing, so I was leading their housing operations, but still really all about the customer, and Australia's on that journey, very much on that journey, the same as we are in the UK. And then the pandemic hit, but it was about a week before the pandemic hit that I decided it would be a good idea to make Big Picture my full-time occupation. It had been a part-time occupation, a one-day-a-week thing, or whenever I had a holiday kind of thing, since 2012, but it became my full-time occupation a week before the pandemic hit. And I was really lucky because I was in Australia at the time, and I just thought, oh my God, I've just given up my job to run a business, and now we're in a worldwide pandemic. What am I going to do? And I thought, what I can do? We're all stuck at home, and housing organisations just aren't used to remote working. Yeah, we had housing officers out there with iPads and things, but that's not full-on remote working. And I thought, if I create a training program that is building trust and leading remote teams, that maybe people will be interested in that, and I can deliver it on Zoom. And that's where it all kicked off, big time in Australia, big time through that. And that got me known because there were quite a lot of general managers and directors on that training. And that got me known in Australia. And then we're getting close to now, and then my father got taken really seriously ill in June. I got the first flight out of Australia, but I don't know if you remember back in the pandemic, Australia closed all of its borders. If you left, you weren't going back. So I got the first flight out of Australia to be with my dad, and got stuck in the UK essentially. We'd got people living in our own home, so they were renting our home. So I had to rent somewhere while someone else lived in my house whilst we were back here. And then Dad sadly passed away at Christmas. My husband came out and he too got stuck for the funeral. So I thought, well, I'm in the UK, so I'm working nights in Australia. This is ridiculous. I'm in the UK and I have all this experience in the UK to share. Why don't I start working in the UK too? Then I can do days and nights, work 24/7. And that's the way it's carried on ever since. Backwards and forwards between Australia and the UK, working nights and days, and the business is going from strength to strength, both in Australia. Well, Australia, I've got 3-4 people who work for me in Australia. In the UK, really, really is picking up. So that's where we are. That's me in a nutshell.
What a fascinating journey and amazing stories. So I can resonate some of it. Started my journey as well, coming up the ladder of a housing assistant upwards as well. So what difference you noticed? And obviously you see in the housing sector in UK and Australia. What do you think the key things you noticed? Was there any similarities or differences?
There's not much difference, to be quite honest, which is why it's so transferable. It's a very similar system. But there are some key differences. One of them being that Australia is not as mature a sector as the UK. So the UK, we've been providing housing since, well, if we could go all the way back, couldn't we, to Cadbury and Salt and, philanthropy and all of that, and Octavia Hill. That's been happening. Australia mainly went into public housing, much as we did in the UK, just after the war. So Homes for Heroes and all of that, same thing. But it stayed in Australia, it stayed in the state control. So whereas in the UK in the 80s we started transferring out to housing associations, in Australia it stayed in state control really until the early 2000s. So they're a little bit behind the ball, but they're catching up so quickly, and there are a lot of British people out there now working in the sector. It's not unusual to find other people, who'll say, I come from Housing Association in the UK. You can tell from their accent anyway. Say, oh, where are you from? It's such a small sector. You can't even go to Australia and get away from it, honey. It doesn't matter where you go. You still bump into people that you've heard of or very small. And so because there are quite a lot of British people out there, the sector is catching up very quickly. One of the things that I have noticed is the housing association sector, they call it community housing in Australia, but nevertheless there are still housing associations. The housing association sector has a lot of people who've come out of the supported services into the housing association sector, the community housing sector. And so they're very much people focused, they've got people at their heart. That's one thing I have noticed. Customer service tends to be, for a lot of people who work in the sector, it tends to be at their heart. Whereas in the UK, it wasn't like that. We had to train it into people, didn't we? Change cultures. And I've noticed that in Australia, everyone is like a sponge. They just want to learn. They want to learn. You say you come from the UK, they want to know. They're really interested. Whereas in the UK, it's almost like a resistance to new people in the sector. We'll go with who we've always gone with because we go with what we know. And when somebody comes up with new ideas, that's a bit, I don't think our people will like that. And you think, But you need to do something different because you're not getting what you want from what you're doing at the moment. So you need to do something different. That's what I've noticed.
So, big picture training. So, can you, talk a bit about what that means? Or how you see the big picture training in customer service? Obviously, this is something I can see you passion.
Well, when I first created big picture training, the focus wasn't on the customer experience. When I first created it back in 2012, it was about operational training into the housing sector. But what I soon realised was the training that I create is naturally puts the customer it's always done through a customer lens. Any training that we create at Big Picture Training puts the customer at the heart, and it's always through a customer lens. We always talk about values, and it's always very reflective training. Get people to reflect on their behaviours and values. And so it seemed really natural to me when I launched in the UK that we give it a customer experience, a customer service focus, because that is what is missing at the moment in the UK. Now, we have all organisations in the UK will say they put the customer at the heart of what they do. But I would challenge and say, I don't believe the customer is at the heart of what people are doing necessarily. And I know there's some organisations out there who are fantastic, but there are a lot of organisations out there who aren't getting it right. And they're the organisations, that I'm really keen to work with, because anything that we do, and when you say customer service training, what people usually think of is, I'll go in, like Mary Gober, for example, customer service. Yeah, we can do that, and we do that. And we roll out those customer service training courses. Absolutely, and we do it. The thing that's unique about us at Big Picture is we do see the big picture, because we are all experienced at housing operations. So we're not learning, we have got learning and development people who work with us, don't get me wrong, but all of us have worked in the housing sector. So all of the training that we provide is highly relatable because we've got those stories that we can tell. We're all fully qualified to deliver training as well. So we're dual skills in that respect. But we always, the training we provide, whatever it is through a customer lens. And actually, all training should be about customer, shouldn't they? Because what we do is people business. So if I'm providing clear business writing training, that's about your customer, because that's you communicating with your customer. If I'm providing professional boundaries training, that's about your internal and external customer. It's about the way you behave with them and the boundaries that you set. If I'm providing having a difficult conversations training, again, it's all about your internal and your external customer. So when we say big picture training provides customer service and customer experience training and consultancy, it's not just those training programs that Mary Goebel will go in and do. It's all of those behavioural aspects to the services that we provide in housing. And that's what makes us unique, is that we've also all had that experience too. And I'm very lucky to work with, we call ourselves the Big Picture Posse, a posse of really, really motivated and passionate people.
Wow, that's obviously I can see your passion for customer. So hearing the customer voice, I can also see that. So how do you ensure organizations fully listen? Because you said, this is one of those things everyone say, and act upon the customer feedback to make sure the feedback is acted upon. And as you can see, several tragedies happen in the sector as well. You can relate to.
Yes. And we don't want to see another Awab Ishak, do we? We don't want to see another Grenfell. We should be listening to people like Kwejo Twenaboa. I don't know if you've read his book, but I've read his book, and I'd read the first chapter, and I had to sit down a minute and reflect, because I could see what he was writing. I could see it happening in my experience. Never with me, but I could see my colleagues doing it and thinking at the time, this is wrong. Why are we doing this to people? Why are we behaving that way? And the fact that it still carries on and we're still making the same mistakes is what motivates everyone who works with us at Big Picture. Because we need to make a difference. And then we say that all the time. And if you looked at any of my LinkedIn posts, it's usually got make a difference, hashtag make a difference somewhere in there. Because we even call the customer service training make a difference. And I'll say this all the time, you can't just sugarcoat something to make it better. So in terms of a housing organisation, putting in a new CRM, adopting a new housing management system, doing a restructure and creating a few new roles, giving housing officers fewer properties. These are all good things. They're all fantastic. Getting digital, fantastic. Doing customer segmentation work, brilliant. But it's what you do with that's what will make the difference. Because that is just the sugar on the top, isn't it? And it's how you behave and what you do. That's what's going to change people's perceptions of you. And I've got a bit of an analogy, actually. If you had a glass of water and then you put urine in it, okay, and that sounds disgusting, I know, but if you had a glass of water and then you put urine in it, and then you put 2 tablespoons of sugar in it to make it taste better, it's not going to remove the urine, is it? It might make it taste a bit better, but it's not going to remove the urine. In that analogy, the water is the housing organisation, the urine is the poor culture, and the sugar is all the things that people are doing at the moment that they think is going to make a difference, when actually what's at the core of it is the culture. You need to get that right. And so when we go into organisations, what we attempt to do, and we're not always successful, is we attempt to engage with the senior management team and the exec first. Because if they aren't on board with what we're saying, we may as well go and stand outside and shout into the wind. Because, when you run these programs, people will take on board what you're saying, they'll reflect on their own behaviours, they'll come out of there really motivated. But if their line managers and their line managers and everyone right up to the board and the exec aren't walking the walk and talking the talk and using the same language, they'll revert back to pack culture. So you've got to the change has to start at the top, but from the bottom. You've got to have a bottom up and a top down approach. So whenever we go into an organisation, and some organisations aren't keen, but we insist on your chief exec and your board of directors need to come along to the first pilot of this session, and then we'll take their feedback and then we'll go from there. And we also, before it, if we're doing a full rollout of customer service training per se, we also won't do that unless we've listened to the staff and we've listened to some customers as well. So we have to listen to staff, listen to customers. We have to have exec on that pilot program, and then we'll roll out to the whole organisation. But it doesn't stop when we leave, Hony, and that's one of the other things that frustrates us too, is it doesn't stop when we leave. And so we've started now instigating ways of making sure that it carries on even when we've left the building. So, we'll give them guidebooks, we'll give them handbooks, we'll check in at 3 months, at 6 months. We'll give people ideas of how to carry this on and keep that culture going through the organisation. But hopefully we're making an impact, and we do see that we're making an impact. We hear it and we see it over time. But it's like a big ship, isn't it? If you're turning a tanker, it takes a long time to turn it. If you're changing an organisation, big picture training coming in won't change it. Everyone's got to be on board. That's the thing. And that's the thing we find frustrating. It's a culture change.
Yeah, I agree completely. The culture is the strategy for breakfast, isn't it? So it is one of those things I've seen organisation and even the board, and it has to start from the top. And if they're not buying into change, this won't be sustainable. So like you said, after you did the training, after a couple of weeks, they all go back to their usual behaviours. So can you share a moment of your career you gone through this journey and you think, gosh, this is not happening here? Any any interesting experience?
Yeah, I went to work for one organisation, and I'm not going to name and shame any organisations, but I went to work for one organisation where I managed a team. There was about 30 people in my team. We managed quite a large percentage of England, properties across quite a large percentage of England, of middle of England, without giving too many away. And when I walked into the office, there was almost like a divide down the office. So there were 2 team leaders in that office who were my direct reports. And there was this wall of filing cabinets down the middle, and they weren't speaking to each other. So we had this team that was divided. And I walked in and I thought, oh, this is interesting. Gradually got to realise that these 2 people weren't actually talking to each other, and that had to stop. So ultimately, I took a long time to get to know everybody in the organisation who was working, but my direct reports. I got to know everybody, started talking to people about what was wrong, what were the blockages. We even had, over the photocopier, I had a piece of flip chart paper with helps on it, and then a piece of flip chart paper with hinders on it, so that when they were at the photocopier they could write what was good about working there and what wasn't so good, and got quite a long list of honest responses, because I was new, I think, and they just wanted to be able to make a difference. And over time, and that was one of the things, was the culture towards the customer was all wrong. It was all wrong. And over time, we changed that. I looked at, I brought in another team leader. So we had 3 team leaders, and I moved the team leaders so that they were no longer sitting with their teams. They actually sat together. And that was strategic to make them talk to each other. They had to talk to each other. Couldn't sit in their little huddles. They had to talk to each other. And it worked really well. And bringing in the third person sort of broke the ice with the other two. They realised they had to actually get along. They couldn't. This wasn't going to be tolerated any longer. They had to get on, and the culture gradually, slowly changed over time. But it's like I said, I had to get my leadership team on board first. So me and the 3 team leaders on board first, walking the walk and talking the talk before we could get everybody else the same way. And it's about living the values of the organisation. So all organisations have got the same values. They usually include words like respect, words like fairness, honesty, integrity, those kind of words. And it was about reinforcing those messages all the time. And that is what I see as a leader's role. It is your role to reinforce those messages all the time. You should know your organisational values off the top of your head like that. And you should be able to reinforce those all the time and challenge people. So is that you showing respect? Is that us being honest if we were to say that, guys? And all the time relating everything back to that. There was another organisation where I worked at where actually it was quite a small one where I was asked, because I think they recognised when I'd started working there, she's got a lot of passion for customer service. I was asked to run the conference for that organisation, and the theme was to be customer service. So I ran the conference and we had 98% satisfaction with that conference. It was fantastic. It was brilliant. And then as part of that, I had a little project group. I didn't run it on my own. Obviously, I had this wonderful project group and we came up with some fantastic ideas. We talked to everybody else about what they would like as well. What would you like your conference to look like, guys? And they all told us. We created an event that would appeal to everyone, and we brought in the Star Awards, which they hadn't had in that organisation before, all linked to the values. So people nominated their colleagues for these Star Awards, and then we had the Star Awards ceremony. But again, it was all linked back to the values because they're so important. And there's been more than one chief exec that's said to me over the last few years, if only everybody lived our values, would be okay. And I have to say, well, where the values start is with you and the board. The board need to know that. Does your board know your values? If I was to say to your board, what are your organisational values? Would they be able to tell me, or would there be tumbleweed? So it starts with the board, the chief exec, senior management team, and then goes from there. And if everyone's not challenging each other to live those values, your organisation's never going to, its brand identity, which is how it wants to be perceived, is never going to become its brand image the way it actually is perceived. And you're never going to get rid of that urine. It's always going to stay there. I bet you love that analogy, don't you? I'm really pleased I came up with that.
I'm not going to forget that at all because I can see, I worked in, like you, the last 30 years, different organisations. I've seen that you're an experience in different organisations. Sadly, a lot of people leaving because of,
It's stressful.
that experience they feel. Like you said, it's a toxic culture, and that is sadly impacting staff and customers because once the staff are not happy, they don't give a great service to the customers either.
They won't give 100%. And customers will never trust you. We talk about Toby Lutkers, the CEO of Shopify, he talks about the trust battery, and I've adopted that because I love it. You start every relationship with a 50% full trust battery. So if you and I, honey, we don't know each other very well. You've got 50% of my trust. Either we build that trust battery or we drain that trust battery. But it's up to us, isn't it? Whether we fill it or drain it. And what is happening in housing organisations is those trust batteries are drained. Customers do not trust their landlord. That they probably started off at a disadvantage anyway because, it's not an equal relationship. The landlord has power. And until we start recognising as a sector we've got power and it's not an equal relationship, we need to build that trust battery, not drain it, we're not going to get anywhere. Now what are we going to do? We've got this trust battery that's really drained. We've got everything we do has to be to build that trust battery now. because otherwise we're on a loser, aren't we? We're on a loser.
Yeah, I think it's not rocket science. It's like you said, it's started listening, actively listening, and do something about it rather than, it's like customer satisfaction surveys. It shouldn't be like a tick exercise. You ask them same old question all the time and not doing anything about it. And then people say, "What's the point? I'm not going to do this anymore," because they're not actually taking my views on board. So, as someone with experience in both operational and leadership roles, what do you think are the biggest challenges in social housing providers face in delivering excellent customer service?
I think the biggest challenge is the cultural one. I think that's the biggest challenge. Yes, there isn't a lot of money around at the moment because there's a lot of pressure on the sector because we've got the fire safety, we've got damp and mould, we've got the independent housing ombudsman. He's done a fantastic job of raising his profile, hasn't he, old Richard Blakeway? He's done a brilliant job, and we moan about it. Well, I don't, but I hear a lot of people moan about it. It's not a bad thing. What worries me, though, about the Ombudsman is that a lot of organisations now are responding to complaints to satisfy the Ombudsman, not to satisfy the customer. So they'll respond to a complaint and they'll create a response that they think will meet the code and satisfy the Ombudsman should it escalate. And actually, your focus should be on that human being that's at the centre of that complaint, not on the Ombudsman, and your focus should be on ensuring that you do such a good job that it's not going to escalate to the Ombudsman. But that if it does, you've covered off all the, you've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. But your focus should be on the human being, and I'm afraid that numbers are so high at the moment that people are just becoming numbers. And that, again, in itself is a problem because with the pressure now on responding to complaints, that is where your trust battery drains even further. Because your trust battery is already at a low because somebody's made a complaint, and if you handle it badly, oh well, you may as well, your battery's run out. You might as well. You can't get a new one. That's the problem. You can't get a new trust battery, can you? And once you've got someone, you've drained that trust battery completely, you've only got to think about someone you trust. Once you've lost trust, you'll probably never get it back. It's going to be so, and an organisation that I think about in this respect is Every. Before they were Every, what were they called before they were Every? I can't remember now. It's gone out of my head. The delivery company at Yodel, they were called. Yeah. And they rebranded to Every because they had such a bad reputation for throwing parcels over people's garden fences and not delivering and parcels getting stolen and what have you. They had such a bad reputation that they rebranded to Every. And it didn't work because they were still the same company doing the same things. They didn't change anything. It doesn't appear that they've changed anything else because Every, still don't trust Every. And that's the thing, they've drained the trust battery so much that it's going to take them a long time now to recover. And I'm afraid that's where housing associations are in the UK. We've drained that trust battery so far, it's going to take us a long time to recover. And we'll only recover through consistent actions. Consistently good, better than good actions, by making a difference in every interaction that we have. And that's everyone in your organisation's got to be doing that. Not just a handful, because they'll get fed up after a while and what's the point? So it's got to be everyone in your organisation. And if you've got people in your organisation who aren't, are they on the right bus? Do they need to go and work somewhere else?
I totally agree.
Yeah, are they in the right job? If they don't like customers, are they in the right job?
Sometimes when you speak to people, you're thinking, why do they even
Why are you doing
join
this
this job? Because if they're not enjoying this job, I always say, if you don't like the job, please leave, because obviously that makes
Yeah.
so much change to yourself as well. It's not just as to yourself as well. If you're not enjoying
Right,
something,
just don't do
you're
it.
not going to give the best for the customer. So you have seen over 30 years of customer experience in the different landscape in social housing. So how do you see the future? Obviously, the artificial intelligence also coming along. So how do you see the customer experience? How do you think we can benefit even better with the technology?
Oh, we absolutely could. There are things that isn't AI fantastic. I mean, I have to say I love AI, but please don't let AI replace human beings because we're in a human service. And if we go down the route that GPs, have gone down where they're removing the human element. Now you can take a photo of your throat and send it to the GP and they'll diagnose you, but pardon the pun, they're not seeing the big picture. What they see on a photo and they think is tonsillitis could actually be throat cancer. They're not seeing the big picture. They're not seeing you as an individual person. And I think, yes, we should be embracing technology. That's what our customer base is expecting. We all expect really fast service. We all expect to be kept informed and communicated with. We all expect people to do everything online. Housing organisations need to get there, and they're not there yet. Some of them aren't anywhere near. We should be like British Gas. Now, some people will say, oh, British Gas. Well, I've only had good experiences of British Gas. When British Gas come to service my boiler, I know when that tradesman is on his way. He'll ring me and tell me when he's going to arrive. It means I can go to work and then I can, if I work close enough, and then I can make sure that I'm back at the house for when he's about to arrive. I can say to him, oh, I'm going to be this long. And they work it out with you. And then that's where we need to get to. All of this morning or afternoon appointments and then not turning up, it's not good enough because that's not what people are doing these days. That's not what we expect. We can even track our every parcel. not we'd want to, but you can even track it. I know when he's coming down the road with my parcel. Why can't we do that? Most organisations who've got in-house trades teams have got trackers on the vans. They could do that. They could implement something like that. But they still stick to this morning or afternoon appointment thing and then don't turn up, which is the frustrating, and then don't communicate that they're not going to turn up with you. Because they must know in advance they're not going to turn up, so why aren't they having that conversation with you? And why is it that, you'll have here, you've got me, I'm on a roll now. Why is it that you'll have, every year we know winter comes along and boilers break down. So every year, why do we have this problem every year? The same problem with the pressure on the contact centre because of what we know is going to happen. We know every year that rent arrears are going to get worse at Christmas. So why aren't we planning for that in July? We need to be more, and I hate to say it, commercial in that respect. We are running a business, but we are running a business that is all about people. So it needs to be, and I've been saying this since 2013 or 12, we need to be commercial but with a social purpose, because we're running a business, and until organisations start running a business with a social purpose, we're going to be on a loser. So and I think they did start doing that for a while, but it went too far the other way. It went too commercial, and I think that's part of the problem. It went too commercial. So we need to sort of rein it back in a bit. And we need more people who challenge. So when you're creating a policy or a process or a new system or a new way of working, we need people who say, what about the customer? What input has the customer had into this? So what for the customer? Because this is good for the organisation, but so what for the customer? Is it good for them? Because if it isn't, why are we doing it?
It's a very great advice, Jo. I want to move on to the next is, what advice would you like to give to organisations in the social housing sector, especially looking to improve their customer service? So obviously, apart from hiring Jo.
Apart from hiring us, because we're fantastic. No. Apart from hiring, I would like all organisations to take a look in the mirror and just ask themselves, are they truly living their values? And And in what ways can challenge yourself as a director of a customer experience, as a chief exec, as a head of service, as a team leader, as somebody who works front facing? Challenge yourself and ask yourself, how have you lived the organization's values today? And when an experience didn't go so well, reflect on that and ask yourself, what could you have done differently? And just be honest with yourself. Did I truly live the organisation's values during that experience, or could I have done something differently? Rather than blaming the customer for being angry with you, ask yourself why. Why? Always ask why. Get to the root cause of the problem. Why? And why are we seeing this many complaints? What are the main issues? What is the root cause? What do we need to do differently? But it goes back to individuals as well. Just take a look in the mirror and really challenge yourself. You presumably work in housing because you want to make a difference. How have you made a difference today? Have you? Or have you blamed the tenant or the leaseholder or the shared owner for the problems you're experiencing today? Because you're probably the problem, not them. Because they wouldn't be angry with you if you were great, would they? They're angry with you because they're emotional, because you've done something. Behind every behaviour there is an emotion. So what is it that you've done to cause that emotion? Or not necessarily you, but your organisation. Just take a look in the mirror and reflect, because there will be something. And what is your learning from that? And what are you going to do differently? And how are you going to make sure things change? Because there's a lot of organisations who are capturing all this data from complaints and doing nothing with it. Nothing. Except sharing it at board level or with the directors. But what are the directors doing with it? What's the board doing with it? What are you doing operationally with it? Or are you having the same thing happen over and over and over again, so that you've got repeat calls coming into your contact centre? Your contact centre staff are burdened. Wait times are, we did a little survey last week of wait times over 7 housing organisations. Average 20-minute wait time, honey, 20-minute wait time. And they had...
And how many times, how many customers may say, this is enough, I'm not going to, going to wait for anymore, and they might drop out as
I'm
well.
not going to wait. And they cannot necessarily afford to wait, because whilst an 0345 number or an 0300 number is usually inclusive minutes on someone's phone plan, a lot of our customers are on pay-as-you-go. And a lot of our customers won't want to use their inclusive minutes, waiting 20 minutes to get through to you on the phone. And so, you're alienating a whole group of customers, because, and what percentage of those calls coming into your contact centre are unnecessary repeat contacts because you failed to address the root cause issue? There'll be things that are repeat calls that are unnecessary because somebody's not phoned somebody back, or there's numerous issues around damp and mold that's not been addressed, or whatever it is. There'll be, or you failed to communicate something and everybody's really angry now, so they're ringing you. Address the root cause, and you'll reduce the impact on your contact centre. But it's just not good enough. And there's one organisation that we surveyed last week who refused to take a repair over the phone, and they're a big one. They refused to take a repair over the phone. They said they will only take emergencies over the phone. Everybody else has to go online and do it through the portal. So, well, what's going to happen there in my head? I immediately think, a certain percentage of your client group isn't going to report that repair. Then they'll live with that repair. It will become something much worse, and then it will become an emergency, and you're going to have a huge pressure on your emergency repairs, so that you're unable to address your day-to-day. You're doing that the wrong way round. That's
It's not helping the customer. If the customer wants to report digitally or for whatever the platform, and then do encourage. I know 50% of them might do, but the other 50% probably want to talk to someone because they probably don't have the confidence to, put that through a digital platform.
So yeah, There's a whole host of reasons. There's a whole host of reasons why you wouldn't be able to. 7 million people in the UK are functionally illiterate for a start, so they're going to struggle to do anything like that online, let alone describe a repair. Okay, and so you're going to get a load of repairs that are reported wrongly anyway. Then you've got the fact that people don't have the confidence to do that. Maybe English isn't their first language. Maybe they're not technical enough to be able to tell you what's wrong. They think it's a water leak, but actually it's not a water leak at all. It's something else. And sometimes you just want to explain it to someone, don't you? Sometimes you just want to talk to a human being, and if you can't, it's really frustrating. So I just think for organisations that are supposed to be putting people at the heart of their service, to have a service that will refuse to take a phone call is appalling. And I hope that's not the way we go. Going back to your original question, please don't let that be the way we go.
No, I would say that's a very basic service. Just pick up the phone and talk to someone within reasonable timescales. I know I've done some work previously to look at the phone calls and understand. Most of the phone calls were like chasing up repairs rather than new repairs. So we look at it's only 10% was new repairs, so the 90% was repair because I haven't heard or they haven't finished or whatever the problem. So I think that's a lesson.
Follow-on works, isn't it? That's a big one, where the initial repair, the emergency repair, has been completed, but then the follow-on work, nobody ever came back about the follow-on work. So now I'm chasing that because the repair's been closed on the system and no follow-on works were ordered. So as far as the organisation's concerned, we're great because we've closed that emergency repair in 24 hours, but we didn't raise the follow-on works. That's a big one, actually. But it's not always about repairs. It can be about antisocial behaviour. I don't want maintenance teams going, repairs always get. But it is the thing that people notice. It's the thing you need to get. It's the part of the service that you need to get right because it's a big thing for people. Your home is your sanctuary. It's your safe place. It needs to be well maintained. And if it isn't, people are going to get upset.
So, Joe, I can talk to you forever. So, what drives you
I can
personally?
talk for hours.
What drives you personally to continue work in this space? Obviously you ask
I don't know.
when you wake up in the morning and say, what drives you? Because I can see your passion. I can relate to you as well.
Sometimes, honey, nothing drives me. Sometimes I get up in the morning and I think I might as well go and shout into the wind because no one's taking any notice. And then other days I think I am passionate about this because I've done it for so long. And also I have been a tenant. I have been a tenant of a housing association too. And I have to say, please, God, we've got to get this right. It impacts on people's lives at such a fundamental level. And I want to be proud of the sector that I've built my career in. I've spent the best years of my life doing this, and I want to be proud of it. I don't want to be ashamed to say, this is what I do. I want to be proud of it. So, and I'm sure everybody else who comes to work every day wants to be proud of what they do. Not like one person in one training session, he said to me, do you know, I've been going to the same barber for the last 15 years. He said, but I don't wear my uniform when I go to work because the barber disses our business so much when I'm there. He said, I don't tell him I actually work for the organisation, so I don't wear my uniform. And I just thought, God, please God, am I never that ashamed of the sector that I won't tell people where I work and what I do. I want to be proud of it, and I think that's what drives me. Please, let's make a difference. And I do see that we're making a difference in small ways in various different places. And when I hear those stories, I'm so happy. I just think, oh, thank God. Thank God. Even if I've only made a difference to one person today, I made a difference to that one. And that's all that matters. It's keeping those behaviours consistent. Keeping it consistent the whole time, and that's what we all need to do. And it's taken years of experience for me to get where I am now. I just want people to learn quicker than I did, to be quite honest. If you're working if you ask anyone who works in the sector, why do you do it? They'll all tell you that they want to make a difference. Well, then prove it, because at the moment it doesn't look like it. It can't be just one or two of you, it's got to be everyone.
Wow, Joe, I think it's an incredible experience even talking to you about this customer experience, and definitely I got the trust factory and obviously the the weird urine experiments as well. So I think it's in my head now. I'm not gonna that, yeah, yeah. So I just want to say it's been lovely, talking to you today. It's inspiring to hear your commitment to elevating the customer experience in the social housing sector, and your transition to running the big picture training as well. So for our listeners, I highly recommend checking out Joe's work on big picture training. See how you can transform your services as well. So thank you, Joe, so much for joining me today. Hi Tea with Honey, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Honey. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for talking to me today.